The destruction of the Earth's environment is the human rights challenge of our time. Over the 25 years that climate change has been on the world's agenda, evidence of the menace it poses has grown overwhelming. Global emissions have risen unchecked, while real-world impacts have taken hold in earnest. The most devastating effects are visited on the poor, who are already experiencing loss of life and life-giving ecological systems due to intensified storms, shortage of fresh water, and the spread of disease. Time is running out. This month's gathering by United Nations Secretary General Mr. Ban Ki-moon of political, business, and environmental leaders is a decisive moment in the struggle to maintain God's earth. It is a rare opportunity to begin to set a better course for our planet, and a critical junction on the road to Paris, where leaders will next year seek to hammer out a new global agreement on reducing carbon emissions. The United Nations deserves the highest kudos for its leadership over the past 30 years on crucial human rights and developmental issues. One thinks, for example, of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, targeted sanctions against perpetrators of sexual violence during armed conflict, and the Millennium Development Goals. These instruments have helped to generate unprecedented global consensus on a shared vision for a more equitable world. But the United Nations can only be as powerful as its constituent parts, nations and people. Its capacity to take tangible action is entirely dependent on the will of individual governments and leaders who feel genuinely torn between short-term economic and political pressures and long-term survival. The climate crisis pits the profits of the few against the welfare of the many. This is surely a moment that demands unprecedented collective action. We can no longer tinker about the edges. We can no longer continue feeding our addiction to fossil fuels as if there is no tomorrow. For there will be no tomorrow. We are on the cusp of a global transition to a new, safe energy economy, a transition that unites people in common purpose, advances collective well-being, and ensures the survival of our species. My prayer is that humankind takes its first tangible steps in New York in September 2014 to move beyond the fossil fuel era. It is a matter of conscience, a matter of faith, and indeed a matter of our continued existence. Freeze further exploration for new fossil sources. The fossil reserves that have already been discovered exceed what can ever be safely used. Redirect the more than $500 billion spent annually on locating new fuel reserves towards developing renewable energy solutions. Hold those responsible for climate damages accountable. Just 90 corporations, the so-called carbon majors, are responsible for $63 of CO2 emission since the Industrial Revolution. It is time to change the profit incentive by demanding legal liability for unsustainable environmental practices. Encourage governments to stop accepting funding from the fossil fuel industry. Such funds erode government's responsibilities as managing custodians of our world. Divest from fossil fuels and invest in a clean energy future, benefiting the world's majority. It is no longer acceptable for any of us to seek to profit from systems and industries that threaten our values. Move your money out of the problem and into solutions. There is a word we use in South Africa that describes human relationships. Ubuntu. It says, I am because you are. My success and my failures are bound up in yours. We are made for each other, part of one family, the human family, God's family, with one shared earth. God bless the deliberations in New York.